forward to it. That one is probably we're gonna run this one until about 2 o'clock. We'll start the next one. Good. Peace and blessings, peace and blessings, peace and blessings, everybody. We are back for our second discussion of the day. This discussion is on youth and family outreach. And I am going to immediately just turn you right over to our amazing panelists, allow them to introduce themselves, and then we're going to get right into the conversation. Brother Green, yes. Yeah, so brother, let us know your name, your work. You come here by way of, I heard you say Queen in Mississippi, so let us know all of that, but give us a full introduction so we know the work.
Peace, peace. Uncle my aunt, resurrection, black power, power to the people, assalamu alaikum, hotep, power to the church. What's good? It's good to be here. Amen. It's good to be here with you all. And I want to thank Isaac for inviting me. I want to thank my panelists for being here and sharing wisdom. This church has my name is Cory Green. I'm one of the organizers with H.O.L.L.A. I'm a formerly incarcerated community member. I'm a father, I'm a son. My family's from Mississippi, the Delta, Mississippi, to Jackson, Mississippi, to Chicago, to New York. And when I was thinking about coming here, I'm really honored to be in this church. I had the blessing to come here last week and hear Reverend James really break down the importance of the journeys that we got to go through to be who we are. And that we had to go through those journeys and that those journeys are important. And then I think about the legacy of African Methodist Episcopal Church and the long legacy of the journey that this church is a part of when it comes to African liberation, when it comes to African freedom, right? And I think about, just how nervous I am and excited I am to be here. And I was thinking about what I was going to say, and I definitely went to my ancestors. And today's a really important day because one of our ancestors had a memorial today. So I also was thinking about them. And I also was talking to our youth and our community members about, what's just going on. So I think I'm excited to be here. Our work is really thinking about how we fight against the war. And we really think about that as framing white supremacy. When we think about education, healthcare, 2022 with COVID, and we think about the long history of this church and so many of our families, it's not without the absence of white supremacy. It's not without the absence of the attack on us. So we think about how do we build programs? How do we build culture? How do we build healing practices at many different levels, at the individual level, at the interpersonal level, at the community level. And we also think about, as African people, as spiritual people, we think about the historical hurt, how trauma is passed on through generation, how that's a spiritual damage. The dehumanization after generation takes away our hope, takes away our ability to dream, our ability to know who we are, our ability to pull into our indigenous original instructions, the spirit within us. We start to lose hope in that. And as African people, no matter where we are on the world, whatever we call that spirit, we are spiritual people. And some of the ways that the war has impacted us, we forgot that comes from within. And we forgot a culture to sustain that and rituals to sustain that. So that's some of the work that we do.
All right. Hello all. Hello, peace and blessings to all my kings and queens. My name is Shatia Simmons Astry, aka Coach Tia, and I am a youth empowerment provider. And what I do is I teach the kids. I do apologize. So I teach the kids educating them on career strategy, educating them on business and financial literacy, because these are the things that I feel our children need. It started for me wanting to learn how to trade and going to different events. And I realized how many people, how many young children, young entrepreneurs that were out there, but they wasn't our skin color. So what I started to do was I started to then go out in the street and started to preach and teach about those different things, because educating ourselves on learning how to build businesses. And that's where I'm so happy and proud that you guys spoke on that, because that right there, it hits home. Not our children being uneducated. Because that's what this really is. That's what this is all about, educating our children. Not only that, but I also created a nonprofit organization that's called Passion for Success NYC. And that is based on children finding their passion, finding their dreams, whether that's through music, through art, through dance. I put on performances for them so that they can express themselves in their fashion, in their form, and in a way that they can be very creative. So these are a few things that I am pressing. Not only that, but I'm also a motivational speaker. And I press towards just bringing positive energy. You know, we need that in the world. We need positive affirmations. We need that for not only ourselves, but for each other, and understanding that, you know, we are beings. We're beings. You know, God gave us this knowledge and this ability to just be and live. And, you know, I want to take that and I want to give that positive affirmations and just, you know, just bring in so much joy. I think that's what I'm about. So thank you for letting me share, and thank you. Before I move, I would love to thank you so much. Thank you, my brother. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this. It is such a revolution, and I really cannot wait to see the future. Okay.
Come on.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Reverend Dr. Sanayi Beckles-Canton. I am a pastor in the A.M.E. Church. I am a Harlemite. I'm a child of this community. I'm a mother of 6 African-American sons. I'm a trauma cognitive behavior therapist. I'm a social entrepreneur. I am a community activist, the offspring of a Black Panther, and I am a Black woman who loves my community.
Right.
My work is extensive. I've been in education for the last 25 years. I started in education because my now adult son was diagnosed with ADHD and anxiety at the age of 6. As I had pursued a career in medicine. I was in school to become a gynecologist, and my son was diagnosed and was having a lot of problems in school, and I ended up leaving. So after being in school for so long, I had to find a job, and I started working at Martin Luther King High School back in the late 90s, going into the early 2000s, when this school was very violent, had a lot of issues. And I started doing a lot of work with around gang violence and trying to bring young people out of gangs. And so for me, working within the school system, seeing the issues up front and at hand, when it was time for me to go back to school to get my ordination, I decided to do social work as well, because I felt as a youth pastor and a youth leader, most of the young people and the issues they suffered with, I would often have to refer them out, because I, as a youth pastor, did not have the skills to deal with some of the mental health issues that was arising due to PTSD, trauma. And so often when I sent them to places, they would come back, Ms. B, we want to stay with you. Why can't we just stay with you? And so in going back to school, I thought it was important, being a woman of color, being of African descent, understanding my history, the generational trauma and things that plagued my community around poverty and violence, that I needed to be equipped as a pastor to support my parishioners or the young people I served. And so I specifically focused on trauma cognitive behavior therapists, looking at trauma and complex trauma and how it infused within our way of being and doing in the world. And so over the last 15 years, I have worked in this community, served my community. I was the president of the school board here for 7 years. I now sit on the citywide for special education. And I continue to sit in circles where I can be a voice for the voiceless. And so for me, the work is learning now how to bridge my religious background with my secular background, because I don't think we live very much as compartmentalized people, but we're really a whole. And so I think the church has to find a way to bring itself back into the community. And I think the Black church in particular has gotten away from that. I was born and raised here in Foster Projects, right down the street from this church. As a child, I went to Canaan Baptist Church in Second Canaan. And so I'm very much aware of the social justice issues that we were plagued with. But I think the most important thing for me was understanding that in those circles, my elders made me very much understand as a very young, smart child that we're sending you out, but your responsibility is to come back. And what we often do as Black educators or educated Black people, we get pushed out, gain the knowledge, but we never come back. And so I'm on a quest to change the trajectory of mental health in the Black community. In my shirt, you see I'm a member at First Corinthian before I came to the A.M.E Church, and Pastor Waldron is still very much my pastor. And the Hope Center, he created really was something I thought for me was an inspiration. And healing is the new Black, right? And we have to really think about healing in a new way. And so about 10 years ago, I came up with a vision to start a preschool and wellness center. It's called the Chloe Day School and Wellness Center. Chloe means to bloom. And so I work with the youngest population of children entering education, 2 to 5-year-olds, setting a foundation with them and their families about what education means and what it's supposed to do so that they can then move out in the trajectory of educating our kids. Because I believe knowledge is power, and those who have the knowledge control the power. And so it is important for us not to get to the party late, but to be on time and understand what we have to do. And so my wellness center is really constructed to really demystify mental health. Being a mother with a son who is diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a son who suffers from anxiety disorder, and you hear these labels around special education and medicating our kids. And as a clinician, I medicated my son, but being able to medicate him in a way that was responsible, understanding what that meant, allowed him to become the man he is today. And so in seeing him as a fashion designer in Nike, making sneakers, traveling all over the world, you would have never known his beginnings. But because I took those services, utilized them in a way that best fit my family, I have now responsible young men in the world that can be a contributor to society and their families. And so my hope is to demystify how we see and reimagine what mental health look like. Because if I ask anyone in this room, you can think back in your family. We all had an uncle so-and-so in the back room, or aunt somebody that somebody took care of. We knew they had an issue, but we didn't quite know what it was, right? And you may have seen them at Thanksgiving or Christmas, but it was always left for one person to care for them. And that person never really was integrated into the family, right? And so my hope is to demystify that, because mental health is real. And we as a community, when we talk about family, when we talk about education, it is those entities that we do not really capitalize on that then become detrimental and more harmful to us. And so my hope is that in years to come in this village of Harlem, that there will be a safe space for Black and brown people to examine mental health and how we do family as we think about educating the next generation.
Thank you. Can we hear you all speaking? We're gonna stay right there with you. Because you all said something that led to this question, and then we'll just flow through it. For the sake of the conversation, if you can, try to keep your responses to like 2 to 3 minutes, just so we have enough time to make it through as many of these questions as possible, but also allow some time for some engagement with the audience. With that, I'll ask this to you, Sanayi, and then we can just come this way with it. So with all of that you just said, why is it important that communities of color, specifically Harlem, invest in more social service programs for youth and families?
I think when you talk about social service programs, you have to really reimagine what that means for the Black community, right? We have been inundated with social services programs in our homes, in our communities, all around us. And so I think when you think of Black families today, we're very much trying to push social service agencies out. We don't really want what they have to give. And I don't think it's that we don't want the social service support, we just don't want the way it's packaged. And so I think Black communities need to revisit how our ancestors, before we became what we call an integrated nation, how we as segregated people had dealt with social issues, whether we dealt with them in the church, whether we dealt with them in small communities, pods that we came together and dealt with the issues as they came. But most importantly, we understood our culture, we understood who we were as a people, and we created a safe space to be. Even when you fell down, it was room for you to come back, lick your wounds, get up, and then go back out. We don't have that anymore, right? And so when you start taking social services funding, you have to be careful that you're not taking funding that harms the vision versus helping the vision. And so I think we have to reimagine what social service agencies, and then that notion of giving back. You know, one of the most important things I learned growing up in church was, yes, you're going to go out, you're going to do some great things, you're going to make some great money and all those things, but do not forget to come back. And so if we're going to talk about the needs of those in our communities, the ones who have went out and got educated, got money, got opportunity, you need to come back and you have to share, right? And so that's how we have to invest. But that mindset between the 90s, the late 80s and the 2000s, that history has been lost. And so we have to first reteach that history to young people and then regenerate an understanding that you are responsible to your community. It's not a choice. It is a part of who you are to breathe, that you have to come back.
Okay, I would say, and to sum all that up, it takes a village. A lot of what and why I started to pick up the youth and be more youth empowerment is because I remember there was a time when my community watched us. Where our neighbors watched us. That's the era I came from. I came from an era where if you didn't have chicken in your refrigerator, you can call on to your neighbor and say, "Hey, listen, we're running a little low. Can you look out for us?" And when you got your either your food stamps or you was able to repay your neighbor by bringing them a few things from the grocery store, and that was appreciative during those times. And when you go outside, you didn't have to worry about your child because everybody was watching them, If somebody did something, trust me, before you went upstairs, before you got upstairs, your mama, your grandmama, or your grandpappy knew what was going on if you wasn't doing the right thing. So I came from that era, the era where you had morals and values, the era where you was able to step outside and be a kid and be free. People wasn't hanging on the block doing anything. There wasn't a lot of selling drugs. Or if it was, we didn't see it, you know? And I think we just want to get back to that, you know, getting back to us being able to take back, which I feel as if we you know, it was never, I would say it was never taken from us, but we allowed the world, time, things I must experience. We allowed that to then take form, and we lost our morals. We lost some of the values, and we lost some of our neighbors, our neighborly duties. These are duties, you know? It's a family. When you say community, community is what? A family. So in order for us to, the reason for us to invest into our programs is because for me, it's all about home. It's about why we can't do this together. You know, why are we not doing this together? You know, why are we divided in the first place? Let's invest back into our communities because it's ours. It is ours. It's a no-brainer. Okay, so for me, why is it important for us to invest into our communities? And I would say Harlem, but you know, let's say Harlem, let's say the Bronx, let's say Brooklyn, let's say Manhattan, let's say Staten Island, and then let's go further out and let's go further out. Let's say why we can't invest into our communities, period. It takes a village, for us to invest and for us to make this work. So.
Peace. Just to add into all of that love. Yes. I think we got to be questioning. We got to question social services, right? As Black people, right? So I just want to echo all of that. And we got to think about, like I said, white supremacy and the war. And we understand that it snatched us from Africa and took us away from our culture. But then it also enslaved us. And we also got to think about ourselves as Black people as international, right? So we don't just think about, you know, our context with Frederick Douglass to Harriet Tubman to the church and etc. We got to think about Brazil. We got to think about Puerto Rico. We got to think about DR, right? And we got to think about how the war, white supremacy, built institutions to maintain anti-Blackness, anti-Indigenous, decultural, to deculturalize you, to despiritualize you, right? So when we look at many of the social services, even when nuns came around and they was going to indigenous communities all throughout the Caribbean and certain places, they was giving them social services, but they was taking their culture away. So we got to be tricky when they give us education and they tell us that the Greeks are the first thinkers. We got to be tricky when they give us healthcare and we get the worst healthcare all the time, right? So I got Asada right here. A sister says she's from the Black Panthers, so we got the Black Panthers here. Yeah, I got Asada here, and the Black Panthers understood this in the 60s. We understood this, like we lost some of our memory. We understood this in the 60s that when they created programs, they called them survival programs. Because they understood that we was under attack, we was in war. So when they built the breakfast programs, it wasn't a social service. It was in the mix of this war. How do we self-determine and survive with each other? Because we understood that these systems wasn't going to give us food. Dr. Matula Shakur and many others built acupuncture. When people was impacted by dope and heroin, they was massaging people. They took over health clinics when our family said that the health clinics wasn't serving them. They took a petition, all of the Puerto Rican grandmoms and many elders said, these white people don't even know what we're going through. They took over the hospital and served the people because they understood that the social services from a long history that the system give us don't serve us. So I think part of what I hear is that we got to get that memory back. We got to get programs that help us self-determine, that help us understand who we are. And when they gave them acupuncture, they didn't just give them acupuncture, they gave them cultural and political education too. They told them how the drugs got in the neighborhood. They told them what the drugs do to our families, how it take away our leadership and our community responsibility to each other, and how that was part of the government strategy to weaken our resurrection. So we got to be careful when we talk about social services, because throughout history, the social services have been attacking our resurrection, been attacking the way we serve each other. And we think about the legacy of this church, it was a survival program. The legacy of this church is a survival program, going through the Underground Railroad, because they knew that the system wasn't going to take care of us. So we had to build programs for survival. So I think it's about us getting into community members and community people and having dialogue, building that local knowledge, bringing us back together, tying the knots to those local knowledges, not being afraid of each other. It takes us doing our work on ourselves. As you know, I love the work you did, Reverend James, and telling us that we had to go through that, but we need our leaders to be responsible, you know, so that they could keep passing that energy of responsibility.
All right. Yeah. So I'm gonna. Let's go a little deeper. Let's talk a little bit about what's the relationship between mental wellness and family stability. And in that, we can stay with you, Cory, and then go back the other way. But in that, I've heard you all say that we need to re-examine social services because they've never worked for us. So what it doesn't need to be, first, what does it need to be? I guess I'm asking that two questions. What is that reimagination of that? What is it that needs to happen? Is it just the village needs to come together tighter? Do we call it something like social services support? What is it? But in that, let's speak a little bit to mental wellness and family stability. What relationships do those two things have?
Yeah, I think we got to reimagine our analysis to social services. I think the 60s told us and reminded us that we can't really trust social services. And that when we go to schools every day and our young people get breakfast, that's because of community work, that people can get food. And so, and there, a lot of the stuff that we got, we stand on H.O.L.L.A, we stand on grassroots movement, learn lessons, the lessons from Fannie Lou Hamer, the lessons from Medgar Evers, the lessons from the original Aboriginal Maroons that are from the Americas, the Virginias, the Pocahontases, the Yamayasi Wars, the Gullah Geechee, right? So we stand on the lessons of our people that got us here. That's how we got the vote. It was because of Kwame Ture, because of the summers of '64. We didn't just get out of vote nowhere. We didn't just get jobs out of nowhere. So these people give us, and these people got attacked by the system. One thing I'm saying is because we stopped, part of the reason why we lost the memory, because the attack of COINTELPRO and repression was so deep that we began to be fearful to tell the stories of our wisdom on how we got here. Not only was they attacking our family members and killing Chairman Fred Hampton and locking up so many people, but our family members couldn't talk about them no more, because you'll lose your job, you wouldn't get funded, you wouldn't get the social services. Right? And those are some of our best teachings. So we in a conflict. The other thing I would say about family and mental health, you got to think about Kemet, Nubia, our ancient African civilizations. All of our civilizations started off at the family unit. And then it became another family, and another family, you became a tribe. And then from that tribe, you built a society, and then you built a civilization. So when you think about how the Maya civilization to Nubia, the Kush, to the Indo-Kush, to how we moved and built civilization, it starts at the family structure. But when you got the war attacking your culture, and for me, my family don't even teach me. When I grew up, my family is old school Black, Mississippi, Delta, Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi, Southside Chicago, but they don't tell me the stories of Mississippi. They don't tell me about Fannie Lou Hamer. They don't tell me about the farm Fannie Lou Hamer was building. They didn't never tell me about Medgar Evers living around the corner from us. They never told us about Medgar Evers. So, but they taught me how to love and survive, and they got us here. And they kept the collard greens going. So we honor our family, but we also got to remember that we got to go back to those stories. We got to go back to those stories, because that's how we build civilization. And in our original instructions, whether we go into Nubia Kush, Indo Kush, you know, to the Shanti, to the Khan, all the way to the Maroons here. The family, the culture of the family is different, but it's similar. It's intergenerational. We honor our ancestors. We honor our young people. We name people because we name them because they got a responsibility to the community. So when we come in, we have rituals that name people. But when we don't got our culture, we don't got our understanding at the family level, the institutions that are attacking us, the social service that are attacking us. That's why even though in the 80s and the 70s, we was getting attacked, the crack and the heroin epidemic, they did a thing on our family. We've been getting beat up by the war, but when heroin and crack came, it weakened the family so much that we lost another layer of our culture. So we got to bring our culture back to our family, and we got to do it in little ways. We got to do it in big ways, and it's hard. When I like Sage and my family, they get mad at me. When I talk about that we still in slavery, that like it's not an easy conversation. So you got to know your hows. You got to know how to get in those conversations. You got to know how to set up a ritual because because you could separate family from having real conversations. People don't even want to talk about real stuff in Christianity and family. So it's not easy work. You know, it's not easy work to get through the healing of historical, structural, institutional violence and trying to live with it every day in our lives as mothers, as husbands, as wives, when we come from different family structures that internalize the different. So I just say, just keep loving. Keep remembering your blackness, your indigenous self, and we got to bring back our memory. We got to bring back our memory.
That's right. You said a handful, and I can. Wow, I don't even know how to piggyback off of that one. But to come with saying the lack of education. You know, the lack of education on the two and understanding the difference between the two, as far as in mental wellness and family stability. Understand that it is one and the same. Okay, and I can say that off of my experience growing up in Brownsville, because that's where I was born and raised. But I remember as I was growing up, there were times where all I knew was Brownsville. I wasn't thinking about going anywhere else. Bronx, Queens, what? House? A house? Well, I'm right here. I'm not going nowhere. And that was the mentality that I had because that's all I see that was around me. Nobody was talking about buying houses and buying cars, educating educating us on saying, hey, you know what? You guys can actually, y'all young double dutch. Why don't y'all go and join a double dutch tournament and maybe y'all can win some money, and things like that. And just kind of being in, I was just so into the hood and the lifestyle, and understand that right there within itself, that's a learning lesson. You're taught these things. Well, we were taught to hang out in front of the building because that's what we saw. So it was okay. There was no one sitting there and they was talking. Again, I was from Brooklyn, wasn't much of that. wasn't much of that. But then as a family and as the structure of a family, not that I didn't have not that we didn't have a strong structure, but it was work and go to school. Work and go to school. Nothing else, nothing in between, nothing, hey, let's be a broader picture. So I only got what I saw, and the education that I got growing up as a child was what I know. Until I had to until things got real, let's say that. And I had to start figuring things out on my own. And I had to understand that, hey, my brothers on the block, they're not going to, there's no food in the refrigerator. Nobody's helping me out. How do you get food? And in turns to which we were speaking about earlier, as to saying well, that's where the lack of not even lack of communication, but just the lack of wanting to even be successful in your community, and saying, hey, listen, you can do something with your life. Nobody told me that. So guess what? I reverted to the streets, because again, that's what I know. What they doing? What are they doing on those corners? So with understanding your mental wellness is saying, educate yourself on what's around you. Educate yourself on the things that's going on in your house, because it always extends from your house. It comes from your household. Okay? It's a lot of things we wasn't taught, and we can't knock anybody because our parents wasn't taught. These are different eras. These are different times. How my grandmother raised my mother is different from how my mother raised me. And hence is different from how I'm raising my children. And thereon, so forth. So building that family stability comes and extends from what you know, and what you know as a whole in your household. And I think that needs to get a lot tighter. We need to educate our kids on saying it's okay to not be okay. It's okay. Find somebody to talk to, and, let's get into the more community work.
So when I went to seminary, I did my doctoral project on creating a holistic parenting program. One of the things when you talk about family stability and mental health, as a mother with 6 African-American sons, I understood very early in their lives that the importance of being connected to their emotions was important, right? So I strategically made it so in my house growing up, everyone ate at the dinner table. And the dinner table became a powerful tool in my teaching and in my learning as something that I created with my sons, right? You couldn't eat anywhere else in my mother's house but at the table. You couldn't bring outside food in the house, right? And so those things perpetuated a ritual in us that we understood. No matter where I was in the world, at 6:25, 6:30, I better be in the house if I'm going to eat. Because by 7:30, the kitchen shuts down. And if you haven't ate, you went to bed hungry, right? And so those things brought me home. Those things grounded me at home. But then becoming a parent, what that table did for me, as the parent, I understood that I had to show up too, right? It was at the table I realized when my son was smoking marijuana, because when he came to the table to eat dinner, he had a smell. I knew what that smell was. So then at the table, we could have a conversation about it. But when me and my husband was fighting, right? Or we had our disagreements about things, and we got to the table, the kids could see, right? And then the question became, Ma, you okay? Dad, you okay? So the table forced us as a Black family to grapple with our issues internally, right? At the table, I had to know I had to make eye contact when my mother spoke to me. I couldn't put my elbow on the table. I had to sit up. I had to sit in a certain posture. So those things gave me the ability that now when I go to a place, I look you in your eye when I speak to you, right? But I had to learn that from a child. And so it's those things that I learned when we talk about mental wellness, that I understood that it was important, right? One of the things I struggled with my first son's father was he was just emotionally detached, right? But that was because he grew up in a house where you weren't allowed, as a boy, he wasn't allowed to cry. He wasn't allowed to express if he was confused, right? And so educating at Martin Luther King High School, what I learned was that there were boys in my class who didn't understand the chemistry, but because they were not allowed to say they didn't understand, because in America, being male is supposed to be a position of power and privilege, but our Blackness supersedes that position. So the benefits of being male, you never get to experience, right? Because your Blackness supersedes that. So it wipes out all the benefits that you might get. And so me understanding my history, knowing that, learning that, When it came to my sons, I said, okay, the first thing I'm gonna teach them is you need to use your words. You need to connect your words to what you're feeling so that when people say things or do things to you, it's okay to voice it, but there's always a place and time. And so in our house on Friday nights, you talk about rituals, we have our family meetings, right? And at the meeting, at the kitchen table, everyone is allowed to speak. The only two things my husband and I ask is that you be respectful, you don't use profanity, and no matter what you're struggling with, it's okay to talk about that, right? And so we did that. We do family vacations where we take our kids out, but my mother introduced that to me, right? And so all of those things became family rituals. So in my house, my mother, in most Black houses, Sunday dinner was something that always happened. You could find Sunday dinner somewhere. So I perpetuates that ritual. So my children know no matter where they are in the world, Sunday, my mother's cooking. So often when my son comes from Japan or Thailand and he might be struggling with his wife, he'll come home, oh, mom coming for Sunday dinner. And it's at the table, mom having these issues, and we can help and support them. But home has to be the safe space, right? Because the world, when you talk about social services and mental health, the problem with the Black community is that during that era of crack in the 80s up to now, our families was dismantled, and now social services stepped in to tell us how to do family, oftentimes, like you said, not supporting what we are in our culture. So therefore, the objective wasn't to make us healthy families, but more so to destroy those structures and make us more integrated and assimilated into what they thought we should be. Back to another slave model, right? And so for me, I use my own family life as a model to say, okay, we got something here, right? And so I can remember when my youngest son is 9, and I got pregnant with my youngest son, and my husband and I did not want any more kids. We had already had 5. They were on their way out, and we were both upset about it. And for like 4 months, we just was walking around the house not speaking. And it was my younger child, who's now 17, who called his brothers up and said, listen, I think they're gonna break up. We need a meeting. So we had a family meeting. And so I'm thinking my oldest sons are coming to talk about their issues, but me and the dad was the issue of the conversation, right? And so we had to respect the boundaries we created over the years, that we were willing to listen to them. We were willing, because we were people too. We didn't have all the answers, but that is what we have to do as a Black family. We got to tell the truth. We got to tell the truth when we as adults make mistakes. We have to tell the truth. We cannot allow things to perpetuate in our families, whether it be as some call them sneaky uncles sleeping with the kids, and we all know about it and no one's talking about it. We got to talk about the dysfunction in our families, right? Among ourselves, tell the truth, find our solutions, and before we let the outside come in and tell us how we're supposed to operate, what parenting looks like, because what parenting looks like for a Black family is very different. And so as a mother of Black sons, I learned very young that I could never teach my sons what it meant to be Black and male in America, no matter what my experience was. So whether I was with their dad or not, I had to find other Black men in their lives to help them understand how to navigate that, because that world was very different, right? And so we have to create a table at home where our kids are not allowed to be on the computers. If you think about Black homes today, how many kids eat at a table? Do a house even buy a table? Right? I had a friend who her son was texting her in the room and she's in the kitchen. Absurd. How is he going to ever learn to look at somebody and talk to them if he has to text? But we have to be responsible for that. So at the end of the day, we can't really rely on our mental wellness. But that goes back to demystifying. In our communities, mental health is viewed as crazy. Something's wrong with me. No, it's not that. Just the generational trauma from slavery is in your DNA that makes you behave and think a particular way. You have to understand that your inability to connect emotionally was because you was for 400 years told you wasn't even human. Right? And so I think when we can have those conversations, understand our history, and make a decision about your own family. What is going to be our family rituals? So I have sons, and the thought is always, you lose your sons when they get a wife. That wasn't my thought. When my sons started dating, I told them I'm gaining a daughter, right? And so here are some of the family rituals we do that we would like you to participate in. I understand you come with yours, but here's what we have. And I think that's what we have to get back to. Instead of becoming combative within our community to each other, we have to make room for everyone at the table, right? And so the table is really how I really cultivate good mental health, good family values that then go out into the world and they find their niche to take those values that our ancestors have given and perpetuate them. Maybe twisting it a little bit to fit their existence, but understanding that the base, the root of who they are will only make their tree grow stronger, even if they decide to get rid of some of the branches that came with it, right? So I think that's when you talk about mental health, you've got to get back to family. The Black family, because of crack and drugs, have destroyed us. Till we first tell the truth about that, whether we do it in a church or we do it in a community environment, we're not gonna get better, right? Till we as a Black community understand that there are benefits that racism brings, right? The reason racism is hard to talk about in the Black community is because of the negativity, the anger, the pain of what it did to you. The reason it's hard for white folk is because of the shame and the guilt. So I'm in these negative feelings, you in them negative feelings, but racism is still sitting there. Until we tell the truth about what this thing called racism and systematic oppression has done to people of color, you cannot begin to train the next generation. Because the one thing you got to remember is our children are removed from what our ancestors went through. They don't know what a lynching looked like. They don't understand what people in the South struggle through or walking for something. It's just like to them the same way as to other groups. Oh, that's what they went through? So one of the things I do with my family every January for Martin Luther King birthday, we travel somewhere in the United States for them to physically see a structure of African-American history. Whether we go to the Woolworth in North Carolina so they can see this is the actual place people sat that got spit on and thrown on so that you can now go to any restaurant you want. You've got to make the connection because our kids are removed. You can't ask them to carry a banner that they don't have a part of. I call these young people the touch, taste, feel generation. If they can't touch it, taste it, feel it, they don't care about it. So if you know that's who they are, you have to make sure you bring the touch, the taste, the feel to them. My kids hate January because we look at all kinds of Black history movies, right? And then we go on a weekend trip and put it in context. But when I take them out of their community and put them in predominantly white structures, they're not confused when microaggressions start. They know what it is, they can call it what it is, and call it out if they choose to, or use it, put it in their bag for another day to deal with it. But if you don't give the young people that tool, you can't expect them to fight. If you don't give me any weapons to fight with, how am I gonna win? That's right. And so that, when you talk about mental health is an essential part. Church did it for our ancestors. That's right. When the world beat the heck out of them, they came to church. And they loved on each other. They ate food together, right? And then they went back out and fought again. Ain't no children and young people in church. I have a church in Tuckahoe. I got 16 members and all my members are over the age of 65, right? That's a testament to what I inherited. But that's because someone before me did not cultivate the young people. So if you have a church that have young adults and young people, you got to cultivate a space for them, right? And so we as a community, before we can do anything, we have to first start at home. What is your home looking like? And can you honestly say you okay with it?
Any questions, because I think that where y'all took the conversation was exactly where it needed to go. I know me personally, I have a wealth of new knowledge to take, that we can begin to use. I just want to give everyone an opportunity to say their last words, 60 seconds, real quick, just take us out. Any last words, final words, comments? What should people listening take away from all this? Because you all said a lot. Maybe in 60 seconds, give people some first steps that they can take. Youth and families or families. Maybe talk to a single mother or something, you know. What's the message going on in this conversation?
I think we got to keep loving ourselves. We all got an important role when it comes to building up ourselves to go back to our family, right? All of the stuff that we said, whether it's history, whether it's creating that table teaching, whether it's creating that community that take care of everybody. And this thing is a process. What I want to say is that, you know, shout out to my wife too, because that was a deep question. What's going on at home and how it looks, and are you okay with it? Because we definitely need some healing at home, man. And like Chairman Fred Hampton said, you got to have love for the people, man. You can't give up on each other so quick. You got to know how to fight, man, because white supremacy, the war is trying to take us from ourselves and our relationships. And you got to know how to journey with people, even, you know, people that rob from you, even people that hurt you. You got to know how to still love them and still call them your wife, your husband, your sister, your brother, and give them love and accountability, you know, through the journey, through the process of love. And I think that's some of the stuff I want to leave us with, like, you know, it's on us, man. It's on us, man. And we got a nephew, we got a wife, we got a cousin, we got somebody today that ain't in church like us. They ain't in the books like us. They ain't talking about our culture like us. So let's start with our cousins, our aunties, our uncles.
Yes. I would want to leave off with saying that let's do more for our youth. Let's be more youth empowerment. Let's focus on them because they are our future. Because I remember sitting in a seat in school, and we had speakers coming up and they say to you, hey, pay attention because you are the future. And today here I sit. So when I look at that and I think about that, I think about everybody that was possibly sitting in those seats at that very same time, or the brothers and sisters that were next to me, or wasn't even in the same school, but we were the future, you know? So I say to that, let's continue to strive. Let's continue to empower our youth. Let's continue to pour into them. Let's continue to motivate them, continue to give purpose. Give purpose into our youth, because that's what it's about. That's how we keep our kids off the street. We let them know they have purpose. We let them know that they can, they will, they must. We have to let them know, you know? So for all those that are out there, I just want you to stay focused. Let's stay focused. Let's continue to dwell. Let's continue to work. And let's continue to be positive and stay informative and youth empowerment. And thank you so much, Pastor Khalil, for everything, for opening up your doors, which he will open up his doors to the youth, my youth program as well. And I just want to thank you so much for allowing them to come, because some of my girls, they've never been to church. They've never been to church. They've never been to church. So I just want to say thank you so much, because that meant a lot. So thank you.
The thing I would leave us with is, I would say, I want you to shift your thinking. We must reimagine family, what security looks like. We must create safe spaces in our homes, churches, and communities where our children can celebrate and be acknowledged. Significance is important. Understanding your history, your self-worth, your self-love, teaching that to our children. Helping them understand that not only their personhood matter, but their peoplehood and as well as the society they're a part of, right? Significance is important, and belonging. We must create spaces of belonging where no matter where you fit in the intersectionality of life, that there is a place for you, right? We must teach our children our history. Because if you don't know where you came from, how are you gonna know where you're going, right? So as people who have been enslaved, we're not quite African and we're not quite American. So we need to decide what that is that we are, whether we're Latino or whether we're Black, right? Because there are things about being African that I don't understand and I don't relate to. But there are things about being American I don't understand or relate to either, but I fit somewhere in the mold of both, right? And so having our children understand that history of where we came from, but where we're going. And then the next thing is creating connections. I think the worst thing that we do as Black and Latino families is that we do not understand connections is how people move in the world, right? Connections, whether you're connected to this or that, it is those doors that have been opened and pried for you to get through that make it possible. But what we do is we get through the doors, we close it, and then our kids are now trying to get through the same door that we got through. So we have spent generations of repeating a fight that we could have been long had. I often think of other groups who keep the door open. And the last thing I would say, the key factors to building strong family is strong parent-child relationships. As a clinician and a person who educates, from very little, when you talk to your kids and have conversations and make space for truth and build relationships, when they become adults, they trust your word before somebody else's. But if you haven't had conversations and you haven't built trust, when they get 25 and they're down the road to make a choice, your voice is not the voice they're listening to, right? And so you can't be mad when they go the other way, when they do something different, because you didn't cultivate it. It's like anything. And lastly, good cognitive skills. Knowledge is power. We have to educate our kids. Everybody's not going to get a degree, but you have to educate them. You got to make sure your kids are going to school, that they're getting there on time. And if it ain't your kids, your neighbor kids, right? That's how we did as a community. The reason we lose, poverty destroys a lot of what we have, but the lack of education. If you don't know, you can't do anything about it. So those are the things I would leave you with. If you want to change the trajectory of Black and brown lives in America, you're going to have to educate them. And not on foolishness. You're going to have to teach them their history. You're going to have conversation about your family history, right? That's the one thing we don't want to talk about, right? And so I think it's important for us to become comfortable with that. But most of all, mental health. If you don't know how to self-regulate, you are not going to survive. And the only way children learn self-regulation is they have to first co-regulate. They regulate with your energy first before they learn how to do it on their own. So if you're not connected with them, guess what? That's why you have a bunch of classrooms with kids throwing tantrums and teachers are scared of them. Because they don't know how to tap into you to figure out how to connect to who they are. So my say is social wellness has got to be on your agenda, not just work and education. Be blessed.
All right. Hi, I wanted to say one more thing, and I wanted to speak on educating as well. And I think this is something that's very important. And I am actually putting together a seminar so that we can teach our youth career strategy, business strategy, financial literacy. They need to be educated on these three because it works hand in hand. Our school educations, we are, although they're doing the best that they can, and this is what I say, but they don't teach our children about real life. When things start to get real, because for me, once you get a summer youth job and you get a little taste of money, once that's taken from you in September, you're left to say, hey, what next? And for a lot of our youth and our communities and our low income communities, the first thing we do is we want to get that quick fix, that quick cash. Okay? So we need to teach our children how to not only educate themselves on how to be a business, to be a business, and say, hey, today, 2022, you have it at your fingertips to where you can own your own business at the age of 5. While we're not educated. Financial literacy, while we're not educated on where and how and what to put our money. What is credit? What does that do for us? A lot of us, we experience that after we done blew $5,000, $10,000 off of credit. Our children they can have credit today, but they're uneducated and we're not teaching them this. Not only that, how to also obtain and maintain a job. Posture, education, what to talk, what to say, how to do. Because it shows character, and that's what career strategy builds, character. So guys, let's educate our children not only on all aspects and walks of life, but also let's teach them about real life, and that's financial aspects, business aspects, as well as our money, our finances. So thank you so much for that.
You know, I appreciate y'all because all the questions that I felt like there was some cracks in the conversation, you guys are hitting it, even in your conversation. So thank you. Come on, take us on.
I just want to say thank you to the panelists. Shout out to Black women. And definitely
shout out Black women.
It's really important that we go back to that honoring of our matriarchal culture and our matriarchal wisdom. I also want to say thank my ancestors and our ancestors, because I'm in A.M.E. church, man. Amazing. I want to thank Isaac and Reverend James, man, for the work that y'all doing for bringing us here. And shout out to D. Marissa, one of H.O.L.L.A people in the background. What she doing for coming through and for everybody being here. She's amazing and lifted my spirit, so thank you.
Thank you. I want to entertain one question before we go right into our next panel. I don't know if anyone has any. Demas, I'm sorry. I thought when you came in the door, you was somebody else. I was ready to pull you up here like you was a panelist. I know. I'm sorry. I apologize, Queen. But I'm glad. I'm glad you're in the building because you was another person that I was thinking about that I wanted you to meet, Reverend James. So I'm glad you're here. Thank you. Any questions before we transition to our next conversation? All right, could we just hear it for the panelists again? This was amazing. Yes. Come on. All right, thank you all. Thank you. So we're going to transition, Yeah, please get food again. I don't know if they closed. It's 2:11. They about to stop serving food. So it's food. Grab some. The thing is playing downstairs, so y'all can watch the talks downstairs.